I tried to tell her, I'm like, no, no, no. This was a drug-induced panic attack, and now I don't feel real. I felt like I was in like a vacuum, like there was no oxygen. Everything felt too close, like I was in like a claymation almost, or an animation, and it was a terrifying, terrifying thought. When you're going through it, anything goes, and anything can be a problem.
So now that you have fully recovered from DPDR, is getting back to normal really getting back to normal?
No doubt. Yeah, even better. I felt hopeless at times, but I'm living proof, as well as everyone else that Sean has talked to, and there is not one case of anyone who was permanently caught in DPDR. You didn't catch the one version of DPDR that can't be cured, and even if they're caught in it for a long time, that can be undone.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, creator of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm speaking with Michael McCullough, 25 years old, originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and now living in Raleigh, North Carolina. Michael's experience with depersonalization derealization disorder began in 2022, just before his senior year of college, after taking a 5 milligram cannabis edible. What followed was an 18-month battle with DPDR that completely disrupted his sense of reality. His symptoms included feeling like reality was fake, a deep sense of disconnection from the world around him, the terrifying sense that everything was made of plastic, like he was trapped in a vacuum without oxygen, and severe anxious thought loops about the nature of reality, questioning whether anything was real, struggling with solipsism, and feeling stuck in existential fear. Michael has told me that during that time, he used to watch the recovery interviews on my YouTube channel and would say to himself, one day I'll be one of those interviews when I recover. And now Michael is fully recovered. He wrote to me recently and said, I'm confident that I can now share my message in a way that will be helpful to many others who are in my situation. And today he's doing just that, sharing what happened, how he got through nearly 2 years of cannabis-induced DPDR, and what life feels like now that he's on the other side. Michael, you're very welcome to the channel. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Originally from the North Shore of Mass, about a half hour north of Boston. Then went to UMass Amherst. I played football there. And then after that, after graduating, I moved down to Raleigh, North Carolina about a year and a half ago. And I've been down here, and I'm loving it down here too.
Nice, nice. I visited Boston years and years ago. I was there for a film festival. I was actually at I think was it called Somerville? Is there a town called Somerville outside Boston?
For sure. Yeah, I got friends and family there, probably about a 10-minute drive from downtown.
No way. Got friends and family there. Yeah, yeah. There's an Irish film festival on there, and I was invited over for a screening of a film I directed, and I had the best time. It was
That's
there's
really cool.
yeah,
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 big Irish town there.
yes, big strong strong Irish contingent, and yeah, they took me out to a bar called, I think it was called the Burren maybe. And
Yes.
do you know
My
what it's
friends go there all the time. I do. Yeah.
no way.
Yeah.
That's gas. Yeah, we had an absolute brilliant night there. It was so much fun. So yeah, I gotta get myself back to Boston, back to Somerville sometime soon.
Definitely do. Wait till you get warm though. Not right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good call. And what do you work at, Michael? So I presume you went to Raleigh for work, was it?
I did. Yeah, I work in tech right now. I'm at a company called GDT. We're a middleman VAR. So we work with the people who create the product and then bring that to the end client. But
Mm.
joined about a year and a half ago. That's kind of the realm I've been in from the time, actually right kind of when the DPDR happened. I was an intern at a different tech company, and then came over here right after I graduated.
Right, right. Okay. Well, that gives us a neat segue into my next question, Michael. Can you tell us about your experience with DPDR and how did it start for you?
Sure. Yeah. To begin with, I never really had a drink or had used weed until I was about 19. So later than a lot of people here in America, probably, or worldwide. But my initial, uh, time with it was really good. I very much enjoyed it, doing it with my buddies. I had no problem with it at all. Got two older siblings. My older brother, he'll do it casually, and, did it with him. And, really no problem at all until April of 22. I had done it, and I smoked, and I, never had a problem before. Uh, Probably had felt that feeling of DPDR prior to that, but not in a bad way. I kind of enjoyed it, like, oh, I feel like I'm in a movie, but it never really clicked in a bad way until that night in April. I was with a few of my friends at college, and kind of kept ramping up, ramping up. And then it kind of like you've talked about and people have talked about, that it happened. And I freaked out. I panicked, full on panic attack, had called my brother because he had dealt with that before, growing up. And, he talked me down, and, talked to my mom and dad and all that. And, the day after, I was fine. So that really should have probably been, my hint to not keep doing that. But naturally I did. And, from time to time, from April to July, I'd felt a little bit of that, then calmed myself down. I'm okay. And then finally in July of 2022, I took a 5 milligram edible, which, for context is not a lot, on paper. I've taken far more than that. The typical people will take 10, 20, 30 milligrams and be fine. So I'd taken five, and, I'm in my room. My brother and sister, they moved out. So it's only me and my parents there. And, I it's kind of ramped up, and I felt, I freaked out again. I had a panic attack, and the following, and I was okay, after that, went to bed and whatever. Then I had woken up the following day feeling really weird, and I didn't worry about it yet. I didn't know what DPDR was. I didn't, you know, it wasn't even in my, my thought that I was having. And I felt weird, went through the day, didn't really have any worry, but as the day went on, I was a little bit, like, why do I feel like that? Could it be the edible, or I had no idea. And then I woke up the following day, and it continued. And that's when I got, that's when the worry came. And I'm like, okay, where I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happening to me. And that's kind of where it really began.
Yeah. it's it's such a common experience too. I mean, that's basically what happened to me as well. Uh it was there was a delayed reaction. Um well, for me it was a week or two later, but that experience of having a bad time on weed or an edible, um and coming down and feeling okay, like thank God that that's over, and then the next day or the following week or even a month later, or however long, that this feeling starts to appear, or persist, or you focus on it more. And then what people often think is the weed is still in my system, the cannabis is still, it's still there somehow. How did you make sense of it, Michael, when you noticed that feeling?
I would look, online, or, and a lot of them didn't have, the answer I'm looking for. And then it ended up being, going to the doctor, and, that some of them are aware of it, but, they like to label that, as anxiety generally, which, I know it can be propelled by that, and that's what's holding it up. But that, it wasn't normal anxiety. And, they that was annoying for me, because I knew how I felt. I knew, that was not a normal thing. And prior to that, I had no anxiety, no nothing. Uh Mental health at that time was something I kind of balked at. I'm like, when I heard about that, I'm like, whatever, like get over it. Uh, so that's where I kind of began. And then, I had talked to a therapist at that time. That's what they recommended. And that was really no help at all because, she's trying to do her job. I can't blame her, but she's trying to dig into childhood trauma that I don't have. And, what it, I tried to tell her, I'm like, no, no, no. This was a drug-induced panic attack, and now I don't feel real. My family was great, great friends, good upbringing, no worry, no trauma, no nothing. That's what happened to me, and that was definitely frustrating going through that with a lot of the healthcare professional people who weren't really hearing me. I felt like.
If watching Michael's DPDR recovery story is making you think, I'm ready for my recovery story, the good news is that you can start today and you don't have to figure it out alone. The exact step-by-step process that Michael used to recover is in the DP manual, my complete depersonalization and derealization recovery program with over 10 hours of content that goes far deeper than anything available on YouTube. Tens of thousands of people have already used it to fully recover, and you can too. And if you'd like personal reassurance and guidance from somebody who's actually been through this, I also offer private one-to-one DPDR recovery Zoom coaching sessions. So if you're finally ready to move on from watching recovery stories to starting your very own today, the links are in the description. Now, back to the interview. It's a very, very common experience people have. When you present with these symptoms and you're trying to describe it, but you're having trouble describing it, but you're clearly anxious as well. What will often happen is that your medical health professional will say, well, it's anxiety, which technically isn't incorrect. But when I heard that, I was like, well, this is much more than anxiety. I mean, I feel anxious, certainly, but I felt anxious before, and anxiety never made me feel like I was stuck in a dream,
Right.
And it's so interesting, the childhood trauma thing as well. Uh, I remember thinking at one point that maybe there was some sort of hidden trauma because of the scale of what I was experiencing was so huge. I was like, there has to be a massive cause for this. And of course there wasn't. I mean, I had a great childhood. It was because I had a panic attack, but it's great to hear that you had the wherewithal to be able to say, like, to be able to clarify to your doctor this, or to your therapist this, no, I know what this is. Like, this isn't because of a childhood thing. This is because of a bad experience that I had with cannabis. Um, and how did your therapist, or was your doctor a therapist, Michael? How did they respond to that when you said that?
I think my doctor got it. Um, I don't know that, he was fully equipped with, helping me. But I think he got it. He had heard about it. Like I think at that time he didn't know really what, like, just because I'm telling him what that might be, he didn't know, like, okay, well, it could be, underlying this or that, and tried to kind of, you know, de-escalate it from there. And but he got it, but not really. And then the therapist didn't that I felt like she just kind of ignored, what I was telling her.
Right, yeah. It's part of recovery from this is that we we need to look at what has happened in the simplest possible terms, and think of it in terms of Occam's razor. Like, all things being equal, the simplest explanation is the most likely. So when you describe what happened to you and I describe what happened to me, like, it is, what you're saying is, I I took an edible and I had a bad time on it. I had a panic attack, and then I developed this anxiety-based condition, um, which are extremely common. 1 in 3 people will develop some anxiety-based condition at some point in their lives. That's all. That's all you need to know. it's cut and dry. It's very simple. You know where it started. You know what caused it. You know that these symptoms, when you understand them, how they make sense. It can take some time to to understand that it is that simple. Because when you're going through it, you feel like, well, what if the weed damaged my brain, or what if this is psychosis, or what if somehow I'm in a dream and I can't wake up, or I'm high and I can't come down. And then again, part of recovery is saying, no, the simple explanation is all that I need here. Then that can be it can be compounded in the opposite direction by going online and then seeing all these other explanations for DPDR and anxiety, saying that this could be because of childhood trauma or some sort of like stored up anxiety over the years or whatever. And it's like, no, it's not that. It doesn't have to be that. Um, yeah, part of recovery is getting to that the simple explanation, and which makes the recovery process much, much easier.
No doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, were you speaking to your friends and family about this experience, Michael?
Totally. Yeah. I went up to my mom and told her that, and my dad, and, they, they're very black and white. They grew up in they were born in 1963. They're very healthy. They'll drink on occasion, but they don't, they never really did the drug thing. And, they wanted to help. They got it, but they, you can't get it unless you're in it. And, my dad's trying to figure out, is the weed, still there, and trying to be analytical about it. And I'm like, no, that can't be it. And, I called my aunt too, intuitively, very early, probably on like day two, because she's very spiritual, and I am too. And I just felt like she'd be the right person to call. And she came right over. She happened to be in the area, and she didn't label it a spiritual thing, but she told me in a different way kind of what I'm dealing with, like, hey, you are off balance right now. It's happened to me. You're feeling out of reality, and pretty much told me in a different type of way to do everything that you tell people to do. How to move on, to ignore it, go about your life, ground yourself, you know, uh, eat healthy, do the right things. So that was helpful. And then definitely, I had told my brother and sister. My brother growing up had, OCD and anxiety, and had dealt with that, pretty heavily in his teenage years. So he had never, like, he has had his fair share of, freaking out on weed, but it never led to that, thankfully. So he got it, but he didn't know why. He couldn't tell me why, it was there, after an hour or a day or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I gotta tell you, Michael, I love that you say to your dad, "Oh, it's not the weed isn't still there. It's gone. It has to be gone." And then you're saying to your therapist, "Oh, it's not a childhood thing." Hey, like I love that you have that awareness, because for a lot of people it's the opposite, because we are erring on the side of the catastrophic interpretation. Oh, there's a hidden thing that happened in my childhood, or the weed is still somehow stuck in my brain, and you're like, no, 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 it's it's not that. Like, let's get down to brass tacks here. I know what this is, um and then finding your way out of it. But I love that you were just pushing through these things. I mean, it sounds like you were doing a lot of the right things, when you look back on it.
Yeah, definitely. That was kind of the way I was brought up. And I didn't play football my final year of college, but growing up with that throughout my life, I never really thought that there was another option. I just wanted to go ahead and live. And I'm not going to pretend that because I knew about the DPDR, that it wasn't hard for a year and a half. 'Cause definitely had my moments in there. But overall, I was going into my final year of college. I didn't really have any other option in my mind. I didn't even think about, not going to do that.
That's great. So, can you talk a bit more, Michael, about what the time after that was like? So, were you just living your life as normal, trying to get back to your daily routine, and what were you still experiencing the symptoms in that time?
Yeah. I definitely tried, but definitely had difficulty doing that for a while. I got back to college about a month and a half later to begin my final year there. And, I remember getting to our apartment, with me and two of my hometown buddies, but I didn't, I felt like I should have been more thrilled with, finally, senior year of college. Here we are, gonna have a ton of fun. And, I felt horrible showing up there. I thought, not like a panic, but like, I don't feel good. I don't feel real. Um, just gonna keep going, but I definitely was pretty down about that. And then getting into the year, there it was kind of, when I went to class, like I felt like I tried to lock in, but I'm looking at, the professor up front, and definitely in a classroom setting more than like when it's more intimate, like very bright light, which I did not like. I hated. I wanted the light to be dark. Um, and I kind of felt like he was like a cardboard cutout. Like that's what he looked like to me. And which is a bizarre feeling. And I'll go back for a minute. I have a gym at home where I grew up. That bright light, like I couldn't work out for about a week and a half right after it happened because we had bright light in there. First off, I was too weak. I literally couldn't even lift like the weight more than like 10 or 15 pounds because of what I was going through. And two, I hated the bright light. So for a long time in the middle of that, I'd turn off. There were three different lights, so I would only have one light on, um, and keep it rather dark in there because the light kind of made it more vivid, more dreamlike. I didn't want that. So therefore, going outside too, like you mentioned, I would do it, but I felt like that was the worst time of day compared to nighttime.
Yeah, yeah. The bright light thing is such a common symptom with DPDR and all anxiety-based conditions, but in particular with DPDR. Um, and in very simple terms, your pupils are dilated. It's part of your body, your brain's defensive mechanism. Your visual system is um, on the lookout for danger, letting in as much information and light as possible, which is super helpful if you are in a low light situation and if it's, for example, nighttime and there's an animal hunting you, but not useful when you're at the gym and there's
Right.
lights, or if you're at the shopping mall or you're, yeah, at the cinema or something, then it feels very, very overwhelming. And the thing about people seeming like cardboard cutouts as well. Yeah, I would have had that too. It's so disconcerting. It's such a deeply, deeply strange feeling. But again, it's just another way of describing the feeling of being cut off from reality and cut off from yourself, which is the defensive mechanism of DPDR.
Yeah.
Yeah, combined with the visual symptoms that we've been describing. That one of the ways that can manifest is that the people don't look or feel real when you look at them. Um, can you tell us some more of the symptoms that you experienced across this time, Michael?
Yeah. I think the way I put it to you was that I felt like I was in like a vacuum, like there was no oxygen. Everything felt too close. Uh, Such a weird thing to try and talk about because now, I can't even imagine how I felt that way. But yeah, everything felt like I was in like a claymation almost or an animation. And, it all felt like I was in all of it, but not, yeah, it's so hard to put into words, but that's the best way I could put it. And I would often during that time, which, sounds weird now, but like I would go like that and I'd want to feel the air from my hand because I felt like I didn't know if there was anything there, and that was more of physically what I felt, but I'm glad to talk about, that probably the mental part was, what got me for a while.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I will get to that in a minute. Um, Such a good description, Michael. That feeling like everything is claymation or animation, or that you're in a vacuum, things feeling too close. Um, so it's such a good description of what the experience of it is. But it's when you go to a doctor or you're trying to describe that to somebody when you're going through it. So someone says, "Oh, are you okay?" Like, and how's the anxiety? And you want to say something like, "Well, I feel like everything is claymation," you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember thinking things like that, but being terrified to say it because I was like, but like if I say that, people are going to think I'm crazy, but maybe I am crazy, and this
Yeah.
loop just keeps going, But it's so interesting to hear people describe the experience from the distance of recovery and say like an excellent observation like that. It felt like it was claymation or animation, but how difficult that is to describe when you're going through it.
Definitely.
Yeah. So can you talk a bit more about the mental symptoms you mentioned, Michael?
Yeah. I've always kind of been, a deeper introspective thinker. I think, I enjoy religion, spirituality, law of attraction. I like all that. And, before that happened, I thought that was a cool topic, enjoyed talking about it. During it, not so much. And then afterward, I'm happy to talk about it again. But during it, for sure. I didn't know, kind of like I've heard you and other people talk about, like, I never thought that I died and, was in a dream or in hell, but like I felt, when it came to reality creation, because, I enjoyed that and, the power of your mind, the power of your thinking. I didn't know, what could have been going on, but I knew it was DPDR, but that sometimes does not matter. And you're like, did I create this? Am I alone here? And, one of them was the Solipsism question that, you know, before I went through it, it was a fun little thing. Like I could be like to my friend, like, hey, I can prove that I'm real. And you probably know you're real too, but you can't prove it to me and I can't prove it to you. And that would be it. But during that, you're like, well, they can't prove it. And then, you're on your feed, you have law of attraction. Then, the new age thing that people like to talk about is we're all kind of one, there's one conscious, whatever. But a lot of people are framing that the wrong way. If that were the case, which who knows, we're all in it together and we're all, in it as a community. But when you're in that, feeling that, you're like, one, am I that one? Am I that one creator? And, that was probably, the worst of it for me. Cause I would genuinely, I had moments where at my core, I did not believe that. I knew I didn't believe that. I knew I didn't feel that way, but I had like a pain like that, like, oh, could that be it? And like, I'm like, I'm done. I didn't like, now what? And it was a terrifying, terrifying thought. Which looking back on, you're like that, how could you even think that way? But, you when you're going through it, anything goes and anything can be a problem.
Uh, you're interested in the stuff about like law of attraction and philosophical and spiritual subjects. Yeah, I would have have a lot of interest in that stuff too. I would have read a lot of those books, and I found it to be very helpful at times. Um, but when the DPDR started, then I would look at those books like, or the like Neville Goddard or Napoleon Hill or stuff to do with law of attraction, etc., and then apply that to what was happening and say, as you mentioned, Michael, oh, I brought this on myself. Like I attracted this to myself somehow. So now, and then that fed into this idea of it being sort of a spiritual punishment or something that I deserve, some sort of like a karmic retribution for something that I couldn't remember had happened. And again, these huge explanations for what are very, very simple, actually very, very simple reactions.
Right.
Yeah, because, again, part of recovery is looking at it from the simplest possible perspective and saying that, like, these thoughts and feelings, as frightening, as compelling as they are, including the feeling of disconnection, people looking like paper cutouts, things looking like animation, etc., it is your body and brain's defensive mechanism. It is anxiety. And um, as compelling as they can feel, these thoughts and feelings are the mental equivalent of heart palpitations and muscle tension and sweating. That's what they are. So if you started experiencing like shoulder tension, would you focus on that and say, "Oh God, I've attracted that shoulder tension to myself"?
Right.
Have I?
No, not
Right?
at all.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but it's the same thing. And also, if you do that, what happens? Now you're focusing intensely on the shoulder tension, and your shoulder keeps tensing up every time you do it. So by applying that narrative to it, you are prolonging the feeling unnecessarily. Um, and we must do the same thing with anxiety or with the feelings of DPDR. Is that we again take the narrative scaffolding off of it and look at it for what it is. It's just anxiety. You don't need to bring in concepts like the law of attraction, or like karma or spirituality or even philosophy into it, like no more than you would if you were sweating, you know,
Right. Right.
right? It
No
it
doubt.
really is that simple. But going back to what you were saying, Michael, it is difficult. It feels difficult to put to apply that simple explanation to it when you're going through it, because by God, it feels like you are going through some sort of massive, horrendous, universe wide experience.
No doubt. Yeah, totally agree. And a little bit unrelated, but related. A gripe I have with that community, not all of them, but when people push language like that, I see it today. I'll watch a video and it's like, you know, no one else is real. It's only you. I don't think they realize what they're saying and what they mean. They mean that we're all one and that's okay. But, for me, I'm like, that's bullshit. I don't like that, because then people comment and they're worried. They're like, well, you're saying that you're not real or I'm not real. And maybe I'll make a video on my own and be like, you're not going about it. It's okay for me because I get what they're trying to get at and I'm not in that anymore. But at that time, that would totally have put me off the deep end for a while. And I can't blame people for not, for having that comment or fear, even if they're not dealing with DPDR. But if you are, then that's a knockout blow. You're going to be, not doing well after that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also, it's good to remember that these concepts in and of themselves they're kind of interesting. You can it's debatable as to how like useful or practical they are, but they're kind of interesting thought experiments from time to time. Um, in and of themselves, they're not like the idea of oneness, like or the concepts of like individuality or whatever. They're not in and of themselves inherently frightening. Um, and they can, as you said earlier, Michael, saying to your friend, oh, I can prove I'm real. I don't know about you,
Yeah.
right? So in that context, they're just like fun little kind of thought experiments, and you can dive deeper if you want. But it's when you come across them in the context of anxiety, when your anxiety levels are like 10 out of 10, and your brain is frantically on the lookout for sources of danger, and also is catastrophically misconstruing the experience of disconnection that you're going through. So, this is the thing about DP and DR is that, like, okay, it's completely safe, it's completely normal, it's temporary and harmless. But when you're going through it, especially when you don't have a full understanding of what it is yet, it's incredibly strange. It's incredibly bizarre. Like, it's a feeling of being cut off from the world around you and from yourself that's happening for no apparent reason. So you combine that with the racing catastrophic thoughts that happen with anxiety, and then you open some Reddit or a subreddit where people are talking about solipsism, and you're just like, oh my god, this is it. This explains the whole thing, like, um, and it's very important to pull ourselves back from that, because we can. I did this for a long time. I was on the forums trying to find all sorts of explanations. But again, it's important to pull yourself back from that, let go of all these catastrophic interpretations, and just say, no, it's just anxiety. I don't need any larger explanation than that.
Correct. Yeah, I'm with you. And that can be very difficult to do when you're getting into that, which is why for a long time, I stepped away from that until I was ready. But that word in particular, solipsism word, it meant nothing to me before. It really doesn't mean anything to me now. During it, it totally did. And my problem at that time was, I didn't want to be controlling reality. Like, I didn't want to think that, I was that. And, when I've heard you talk about it, when other little things happen, then you put a huge, universal wide view. I remember, being in the car with my brother and his friend, and, he had a dictionary word of the day. It was that word. And I'm like, I'm going to throw up, because I'm like, did I do that? Like but you didn't, but you get, you put that label on it and you worry, if a good thing, even if it's a good thing, if a good thing happens to me, did I create that? And then you got to look back at the bigger picture of, millions of people are talking about it every day. And, whether you want to get into whether or not it's real or not is irrelevant. It's the fact that, let's call it, yeah, sure, law of attraction could be real. Then we're all doing it because people talk about it, actors, athlete, whoever. And it's like, well, it can't only be you. Uh, and then another thought that would pop up, it would be like, well, sure, unless you just created them all too. And it's like, that is where the anxiety wants to take you. And you have to take a step back and be like, that is a thought with no merit and it means nothing. But, everything means something when you're going through the DPDR.
That's a brilliant way of putting it. Everything takes on a massive significance when you're going to DP and DR. I mean, like, I would, I would freak out about like the concept of solipsism. I would freak out about the concept of like the size of the universe, but also I would freak out. Start, I would like notice my fingers and start
Yeah.
freaking out, right? And I'd be like, but they're just so weird. Like, what are these little appendages that are hanging out of me?
Yeah.
Or my dog, like, or the, I would start staring, what's the dog's consciousness like? So it wasn't just like the big massive things. It was everything. It's a glass of water. It's the color red. Like, it's everything. If that I focused on, as you said, took on this massive significance. and or felt like it did. And what's very frightening about that is that we think that we have to push back or investigate each one of those. I have to go, but why? But what's going on with
Right.
these things on these fingers? What are they about? You know, and that's so exhausting, right? I mean, it's everything that you look at, everything in your awareness, like demands this attention because it feels incredibly significant. But the reason it feels significant is simply because there's an alarm going off in your brain. That's the fight or flight system. And it's saying, are you in danger? Are you sure you're not in danger? Now you're looking around you going like, the house isn't on fire. There's no bear chasing me. I'm grand. But your brain's saying, but are you sure you're not in danger? And then you notice your fingers and you go, and your brain says, what if it's that? You have a
Yeah.
thought about the size of the universe, and your brain goes, it must be that, because the danger has to be coming from somewhere to rationalize the scale of the fear that you're experiencing.
No
Um,
doubt. Yeah.
yeah, and it's very exhausting and very difficult to go through.
No doubt. The mental part, like you mentioned, the mental bandwidth, I was early on in particular, but even throughout, very tired. You don't have to be working out to be tired because your brain is on all day, every day. So
Yeah.
that would wipe you out.
Oh, totally, totally. Yeah. And the thing you said about feelings of weakness as well, like going down to the gym, Michael, and just being like, I can't not be able to pick up the weights. So I mean, I was 25 when it happened to me, and I remember being so exhausted at like 7 o'clock in the evening that I couldn't function. I was like, I just need to go to bed. And like, sure, listen, you know yourself, in your mid 20s, you're supposed to be out conquering the world. Like, that's when you
Right.
are full of boundless, nonstop energy. And then all of a sudden you're just like you're too tired to move past past 7 in the evening.
Yeah.
And then so what I thought was happening was like, oh, I've developed some sort of um what's the term I'm looking for? Some sort of I've developed some sort of condition that has ruined my circadian rhythms, like, or no, I can't uh a chronic fatigue syndrome or something like that. That I sure I developed that. Something else you mentioned as well, Michael. The thing of like the word of the day being solipsism. I mean, it was the coincidences thing is like such a perfect example of how we look at things when we're anxious and when we don't. So coincidences like that used to terrify me. As you said, it's a knockout blow. You're just like, well, that's it. Like,
Yeah.
because I mean, if I was worried that I was like somehow creating my reality, no, this coincidence appears,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh well, what more proof do you need? And then
And it was on Jeopardy too. I didn't mention that part.
no
So
way.
it probably has been on Jeopardy 100 times, but it happened to be during the time I was going through it, and I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah, yeah. That's it's gas. Like the and what's really interesting as well is that like so that if I'd seen that word when I had DPDR, like and I did like, but it would scare the life out of me, and a coincidence would too. Now, in the just about 20 years since I've been recovered, um, I have encountered the word solipsism minimum dozens and dozens of times, just kind of out in the wild,
Right.
right? Right. And
Yeah.
I can't remember a single one of them because it's not about encountering the word. It's about the level of anxiety that you're experiencing and your brain trying to grab onto things as, oh, this has a meaning. This is a weird coincidence. This says something. It's like it isn't. Like, I mean, we small coincidences happen all the time. Like that's not remotely unusual. But when your mental alarm system is frantically trying to make sense of this strange experience, then it picks out the word that you saw on Jeopardy and goes, that's it.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah.
No doubt.
Um, What was the lowest point in the whole experience, Michael? Is there some aspect of it that stays with you?
Uh, Probably kind of two. One, definitely what we just talked about, worrying like deep, okay, like now what? Did I create everything? Like that was a huge, not anything I really truly believe, but the fear was enough, to be, make it horrible. But probably, you know, during, from that time that it happened through college, senior year of college, you're gonna drink, you're gonna go out with your buddies, and um, I never had a drinking problem before that, and I don't now. And during that time, if you look at it from an outside point of view, it probably is no different than any other college kid drinking, but that was a way I found to feel different and not worry. And, I would drink, and actually the first drink or two didn't make it better. It put me in a weird in between. And then after that, that I I was normal. I didn't worry about it. I didn't care. Not even a thought. I'm at the bar and all good. Then, you know, uh, when I'd wake up, I know a lot of generally, you feel hungover and you feel, it can make it worse, which definitely is true. For me, I didn't mind the hangover because I had a reason for why I felt that way. And that was better than feeling the way I felt. So for probably about a year, even after I graduated, I wouldn't, hide bottles, at my house or anything like that, but I couldn't wait for the weekend. And, me and my friends would go out and get blasted, and I'd come back, and, my parents are like, is that helpful for you? And I'm like, to be honest with you, yeah, but not for a good reason. I know that, obviously that's not how I recovered, but I'm like, I don't, I got to a point probably a year in, after I graduate, I'm working where I'm like, I don't really know what to do. Um, I knew what I was dealing with, but I didn't know, it'd been a year, and, I'm not doing all the right things either. So, that, the drinking is not helping. But I'm like, I don't want to keep doing this every weekend, but, that's the only time I felt kind of free. And, obviously that's not the way, not the way out. But for me, probably my lowest point, not that I was getting shame for my family or anything like that, but for me, I'm like, I'd come down and they're like, well, that was a little bit wild. You're at a family party and, everyone's drunk, but, you were drunk, and, what, do you feel good? And I'm like, no. And I don't know how to feel better. Um, so that was definitely a low point.
Yeah. Hmm. That's so interesting that you would have the hangovers, and it's it's something that I've heard before, and I did myself, that the drinking would make it feel a bit easier, and I had the same. After a couple of drinks, I would feel less anxious, and the reason that happens is because drinking reduces anxiety, um, and it makes you less likely to focus on the feelings of DPDR and thoughts of DPDR. But yeah, but hangovers for me were brutal, and was one of the reasons I had to stop, or at least really reduce my drinking. Um, but that's very interesting that you had the wherewithal to know that, okay, if I'm hungover, it's not pleasant, but there's a reason for it. There's a cause and effect there that I can, contextualize much more easily than I can the thoughts and feelings of deep endure. So you felt that for a while at least, Michael, it was a kind of the trade off was worth it.
Yeah. And, don't get me wrong, there were when being hungover, there were definitely times where naturally, I'm on higher alert, but the wake up and feeling hungover was, I don't even know how I can say this now, but the wake up feeling hungover was better than waking up and feeling not real. And I probably for a lot of people, it's both, which is even worse. But for me, I'm like, well, that's why I feel this way. And on top of, another point about the drinking, which I, you know, put together later on, or while I was kind of coming out of it or going through it, and the fact that the drinking can make that kind of go away is all the proof you need that it's not a dream or a spiritual thing. It's like you literally just put alcohol in your body and now you don't feel it. So very clearly it's not an overarching universal theme that, is out to get you or that you're caught in if you can get out of it that quickly, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The big terror of anxiety and DPDR is that I flicked a switch in my brain and I'm stuck like this, and I can't change it back. And then over time, you start to see that, well, there's different things that I can do, activities I can participate in that they may not switch it off, but they can drastically reduce it. Now, it might come back, but at least I know that I can reduce this. So if I can reduce this, then it's not a permanent switch that's been flicked in my brain. It's a spectrum. It changes over time. It changes according to what I'm doing. And even if that's like having a couple of beers and it reduces, then okay, then that means that it's not a circuit that's been fried in my brain. Like it responds to the environment. It responds to how I think about it. It responds to the alcohol that's in my body. And when you understand that, it gives you a sense of control over it. Again, it doesn't switch it off overnight, but it just tells you this is variable. And if you can reduce this by 40% by having a couple of beers, you can reduce this 100% by consistently doing different behaviors to get rid of it. Which brings me
Correct.
to,
Yeah.
sorry, please, Michael. Yeah.
Oh, one other point on that, so I'm not only talking about the bad, the good of getting out of it would be, after I wasn't on the football team anymore and decided, and to that point, good thing I wasn't on the team that year. That would have been horrible to go through that. So, I wanted to have, a good final year with my buddies at college, but when I played flag football with him, didn't think about it. I played intramural basketball, a big time playoff game, you know, uh, didn't think about it. Only after the fact, I'm like, wait a minute, you didn't even have a thought in your head, during that game. It was a 1 point game with 3 minutes left. You didn't even consider that. And it was like you forgot when you did forget. And that, that's a good thing. But, there are, which I'm sure we're going to get to, but the healthy ways you can, move past it and get on from it were evident there too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so with that in mind, can you tell us about what recovery felt like, Michael? What did it feel like to start to feel those changes and to have the anxiety and the feelings of DPDR lift?
Yeah. I'm about a year and a half in at that point. So April, or maybe a little longer, like March, April of 2024 now. And for context, I had a massive, like exertional headache, uh, actually a year before the DPDR in July of 21 from a football workout at UMass where they, had the same amount of weight for me, who, was a wide receiver for that they had for an O lineman. So I'm at the workout at UMass and, they have far too much weight on the machine, have an exertional headache. They tell me my head feel like it blew up, heart rate through the roof, throwing up, went away for a week or two. The doctor got an MRI they told me I'm okay. I had a tiny little benign lesion in my brain that it had always been there, nothing to do with that. But when it came to, the DPDR, I didn't know. So I went to an Eastern medical doctor, like an herbal function doctor that my mom and dad uh, had gone to up near my hometown. And, I wanted her opinion on it. And, she's trying to relate it to, you had that head injury and, then you had that moment that happened to you and that could have, sparked it or whatever. And, that felt a little far-fetched to me. I don't think a structural brain issue, which it wasn't, but had it been, would be triggered by DPDR a year later. So I felt better kind of and was dealing with it, but I had a head pressure, which was kind of the main culprit that I had, main problem. And, I went to her and she tried to tell me, it's the way I'm eating and to cut out everything. I tried that for a month and, I probably felt worse after doing that actually. Because I wasn't like eating normally. But that was kind of like, okay, this head pressure that I'm dealing, and I still had the DPDR, like not to that degree. Probably from the fact that, I got back to working out, I was eating better, not getting annihilated every weekend, but I, had that lingering head pressure, which, I know is a symptom of that anxiety from, being overworked. And so didn't really find what I needed from her. And then I went back to my doctor and they, I grew up, in an organic household. My mom doesn't want anyone on an antidepressant or, unless they really needed it. But, she's really not like anti the big, just shovel out antidepressant to anyone which is happening far too often today. But at that point, I'm like, I'm not depressed. I'm not, I want to live. I want to be happy. I want to just keep going on normally, but, I might need help here. So I finally ended up trying Zoloft, which is mainly for, anxiety, OCD. Um, and in my case, I'm like, I'll give it a try. And so I tried that out and that is what really kind of led me to, feeling my best again. And I didn't know, I know you don't need that, if you can get out of it naturally, but I think I needed that final little kick to get past that. And I felt, after about a year and a half, I'm like, that changed my life. And then it got to the point where I'm like, I don't need to be on that anymore. And I don't want to be, I don't, it it almost was doing too much for me, the fact that, like, I felt a little monotone and a little bland because it was almost like, you know, it was doing too much for the problem that I had at that point, which was no problem. So, I ended up, getting off of that, and now I'm good. I'm not on the Zoloft anymore, I'm not taking any anxiety medication or anything like that, but I think the combination of, changing the lifestyle to kind of remove 90% of it, and then finally getting that last kick with taking the Zoloft, made it so, it all kind of clear away at that point.
That's great to hear. Um, yeah, I mean, I always I'd say to people is, as part of your recovery from all anxiety-based conditions, you have a toolkit available to you of all these different tools. One of the tools that you have available to you is medication. And if you decide to use it, obviously under the instruction of your doctor, and you find it to be helpful, it can be extremely helpful, and it's about rebalancing the levels of serotonin in your brain, and also, it can be a helping hand on the way to recovery. Um, and it's for me as well. I mean, uh, when I went on medication for a while as well, I was on an SSRI, and it helped with my mood and it helped with the levels of anxiety. But just like all any medication, it can't switch it off. But it can. The way I think of it is like it can open the door for you, but you still have to walk through the door. So for me, when I was on medication, I was still doing a lot of the negative habits. I was still, obsessing about the thoughts and feelings, and I wasn't doing the correct things to train myself out of the habits of anxiety and DP and DR. But it sounds like you really made that correct kind of combination. Like you were out there living your life, you were, exercising, playing sports, um, and it's great to hear this that the medication was helpful in your recovery. And what did it feel like, Michael, when you like? Did you notice that the things of disconnection were starting to fade? Like that the feeling of kind of like of things being an animation or whatever was starting to actually fade away and stop? Was there any particular moment or kind of period in your life when you thought like, oh, this is actually starting to get better, or was it all just happening in the background?
A lot of it kind of happened in the background, but I would definitely reflect on that. Not intentionally, just kind of a thought that would come out, be like, hey, you're here watching a show and you feel all right. But and then I would kind of just forget about it as you do when you're normally all right. You don't dwell on being okay. But yeah, a lot of that came before, I had went on the Zoloft, and I definitely felt it a little bit, but once I had gotten on that and just kind of forgot about it, in terms of, every day, like when I took it, I'm not like, well, this is gonna get rid of everything. I just kind of take it and live. And it got to the point where, I felt, it's hard. I wish I had a better answer for people. Like one day it clicked and it's all better now, but naturally, as you continue to wind down that anxiety and continue to live on your own, then that will wind down without you even kind of really thinking about it. Because the thing is, you can't think about it. You're not, if you're thinking about it, oh, am I feeling better? Then you're not going to feel better. It's really about the forgetting and just going to live and, trusting and knowing, like you said, there is not one case of anyone who's permanently caught in DPDR. And even if they're caught in it for a long time, uh, that can be undone. That they didn't catch, I think you've had it in your book or maybe a video. You didn't catch the one version of DPDR that can't be cured. And side note, probably could have mentioned that at the very beginning, but when I was on the forum, I got in a bad forum where people were like, good luck, buddy, 28 years of running, almost like they're bragging about it. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm done, like, well, if they're doing it for 28 years, I can't do that, like I don't, but there is no, and unfortunately for those people, I wish they could read your book and watch your videos, because, it's almost like they've accepted their fate and continue. I mean, you're on a YouTube forum or Reddit forum talking about it. Yeah, no shit. You're never going to get better. It really comes with living your life, and then one day you'll be like, hey, I feel dramatically better, and then you don't dwell on that. You just keep going from there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when you said, part of recovery is learning that you need to stop thinking about it. You train yourself away from not from thinking about it all the time. And one of the engines that drives that is the understanding that you don't have to think about it. Like you don't have to think about, being obsessed about with solipsism. You don't have to think about the nature of consciousness or the size of the universe or, do my hands look weird? You don't have to. You don't have to do any of that. It may feel compelling in the moment when your anxiety is higher than normal, but you don't have to. And also, it doesn't. There's no. There's no big boss to fight at the end of this. There's no big realization. It's just like, well, that was anxiety and it wasn't pleasant, but now it's gone. But you train yourself to understand that you just don't have to engage with this at all. That's not going to switch it off, but it gives you the permission to start to let it go. It is very, very difficult to give yourself that permission and to give yourself the space to let it go if you're on forums all the time and you're constantly discussing it and you're constantly getting into arguments about it and like comparing and contrasting your symptoms and you've had it for 2 years, try 5. Oh, you've had it for 5 years, try 15. It's like, oh my God, it's not. I had those.
Yeah.
I was in those forums too, and I was that person for almost 2 years. I was constantly discussing it, and then wondering why I couldn't stop thinking about it, spending my whole day comparing and contrasting my symptoms, and then wondering why that night I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But I think people get into those habits. Initially, it's a lovely thing to find the forum and to say, oh, other people have this. Other people, this is actually quite common, up to a point. But then, as with all anxiety-based conditions, there comes a point where you have all of the information that you need, and you have to stop scratching that itch, and you have to step away from the forums and start living your life, and take on a more structured approach to the recovery process.
Totally. I do. And one thing I'd add to that is that during that time, I go, you know what you're dealing with. It's required to end because it's a normal anxiety condition, and once you let it go, it'll go. But I go, you know, if I go, it's impossible to last forever, but let's pretend that it would. Now what? Are you going to continue living, or are you going to worry about it forever? And I go, if you were told today that, oh, you're probably going to feel like this forever, which obviously is completely not true. But what would you do? Would you just spend the rest of your life thinking about it, or would you just go live anyway? And that was another one that kind of helped me, because I go, no, I would go, okay, well, I'm going to live anyway. And then through living anyway, it then it goes. And then you're like, well, never mind. It didn't last forever at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it so interesting how a slight change in how you think about it can completely take the power away from the anxiety? Because I got to that point as well where I said, okay, well, sitting around researching it doesn't seem to be doing anything. There's things I want to do in my life. So what I had been doing was I was like, I'll wait until the anxiety is gone, the DPDR is gone, then I'll do this, then I'll do those things. So I wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. And then I got to a point where I said, like, I mean, there's things I want to do. Like, I want to go and do a master's degree. I want to start playing music again. If this sticks around, like, okay, but like, I want to play music. I want to see my friends. I want to do things. And if it's there, it's there. If it's not there, it's not there. I don't care. I'm doing it. And there was a part of me that was saying, oh, but that's giving up. Now you're surrendering to it. So like, then where are you? Now you're quitting. And it's the opposite. It's like when you just say, okay, if it's there, fine, but I've stuff to do. You are communicating to your brain that it doesn't deserve your attention anymore. It's just not that important. It's not more important than you deciding whether you get to go and see your friends or not, whether you get to enjoy Christmas or not. It's not. It doesn't get to do any of that. But it's such a strange little adjustment on how we think about it. It just changes the camera angle a little bit, and then weirdly it starts to dissipate, and you're like, wow,
right.
that was it. Wow, that's wild.
Exactly. In your surrender part too, the irony of that is that when you give it your time is when you're surrendering to it, as if you have to, find out every detail or every every minute little thing you could be doing or part of it. And the more you do that, the more you're actually giving into it and giving it the power that doesn't need to have. It's like any other anxiety condition.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. How was the DP manual helpful in your recovery, Michael?
Very helpful. When I read it right away, um, definitely at that time, it was incredibly like an incredible relief to have it and learn from it. But given that I was a day or two in, didn't have, a profound effect on me as I did the second time I read it. Because actually, I had emailed you probably a year later because I read it, did it good. Then I deleted it because I didn't want it anywhere near me. Because I didn't think that would help me to think about it at all. But if there's one thing that is helpful, it's your YouTube channel and your manual. You completely get it because you've been through it. So a year later, I'm like, hey, Sean, I deleted that. Can I have it back? And you shot me over the link. And at that point, it was incredibly more helpful because of where I was at in my head. And I'm like, yeah, everything I'd read along, and I'm like, yeah, I agree. Oh, he's right. Yeah, correct. And then that was profound for me, um, in that time. And then the videos of other people of you watching it, is what led to me wanting to be on here with you and be another one. I go, I can't wait to be on here talking with Sean about, my recovery from the DPDR. And so you're doing a really great thing, and I think you're far and away, you're the best resource for going through it. Because a lot of people, they have a bit right and a bit there, and unless you've really been through it, you really can't provide that help for everyone else. You can definitely help, if you're a professional or a friend, and be understanding, but if you haven't felt that, it's really hard to describe to other people without them kind of putting a label on, or frankly being worried for you, that you've gone off the deep end. And when I heard you talk about it and how well you're doing, and it's been 20 years for you, that gave me a lot of hope at that time, which is great.
That's great. I'm so glad it was helpful in your recovery, Michael. So a question that everyone asks me, um, so now that you have fully recovered from DPDR, is getting back to normal really getting back to normal?
No doubt. Yeah, even better. I work out, I golf every other day when it's warm down here. Doing really well. Have a girlfriend down here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and that at that time, I couldn't have imagined trying to begin in a new relationship with someone while I was feeling that way. And it doesn't mean you can't, but just the way that I was acting, I didn't want to bring that on someone else. So yeah, overall, everything, is back to normal, but I feel even better about it now because I have the understanding of, at any anxiety in general, not even this, that, it's really all about your frame of mind and giving power to it. So, moving forward, not every day is perfect in terms of not the DPDR way, but, even if you feel a little off and or worried or whatever, you're like, well, you had dealt with what I would never wish upon anybody, and you got through it, and you're better for it. So overall, very well.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is definitely a thing that people report a lot is that after they've recovered, you're still, of course, you're a human being. You're going to have moments of stress and anxiety from time to time. That's normal. Who doesn't? But they don't seem nearly as important anymore because you're like, well, I went through something pretty heavy, so it definitely gives you a bit of more perspective, and I think when you've been through, an anxiety based condition as well, and you have that close familiarity with anxiety, and you just kind of you can recognize it so quickly and go, I know what this is. It's all good. It's all good. So I got one more question for you, Michael. There's going to be people watching this interview who may be going through a very similar situation to what you went through, maybe even triggered by a bad edible experience or something similar. What advice would you have for those people?
Yeah, great question. I would tell them that, you know, I was you. I think that is my biggest piece of advice right there is that, you know, I when I was in the shoes of the watcher, you know, I wondered how and why and when, you know, could any of that end? And I was in that comment section with the people watching saying, you know, looking at the other people you've had on before and that, you know, oh, well, they did it. And these are people from all walks of life. You know, it doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing. You know, I think you've had, you know, other athletes on before, plenty of them. And, uh, you know, I'm like, well, you know, they're no different than me and they don't have to be an athlete either. You know, it's just, it, it's something that does not have to define you. And it's something that's incredibly common. And probably a lot more people have dealt with it than we even know because people, you know, didn't have the forum or, you know, the avenue to talk to other people about it. And, you know, really if you're going to think or talk about this, really just go and read Sean's book and listen to the people who have used, you know, that information to recover and you know who are talking to Sean about what they've done to recover because you know I was in that boat and you know I felt hopeless at times but you know I'm living proof as well as everyone else that Sean has talked to and Sean himself are you know living proof that you know it simply really is an anxiety condition and you know there's no thought or feeling that you know is too dire to come back from and don't put yourself down for the thoughts that you know you do have as if that makes you you know off the rail or crazy you know I certainly you know if you watch the video have had my fair share of you know thoughts that you know are absolutely insane but you know that's also not you it's the result of you know the anxiety trying to push that on you and that's okay but when you have that just let it flow and you know understand that you know that's ultimately irrelevant in your recovery and you know you just let it go and you got to do the right things and you know a final thing would be you know it probably won't happen in one day. It definitely could, but you know, you can't get discouraged and keep doing a checkup each and every day because that, you know, that is how you perpetuate it by even giving it that attention. So, you know, kind of like anything, you know, new skill or working out or training or learning how to play, you know, music you know, you don't check up every day and wonder, "Oh, can I do this yet?" You know, you know, it's a progression over time and, you know, you put in the work to do it and, you know, eventually you'll look up and realize that, you know, I was never really, you know, in trouble to begin with. And by work, I mean, you know, it's not a huge burden. It's really just living. And I know at that when you're going through it, living can and does feel like work but really it's about just doing, you know, whatever you would normally do. And which is actually much easier than learning how to play an instrument or acquire a new skill. It really is all that is required of you is to go live. And, you know, if you ever need help, you know, lean on what Sean's doing. It's phenomenal.
Thanks so much, Michael. And that's great advice. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for sharing your whole story with the channel. It's been absolutely fascinating and I've really enjoyed speaking with you. So listen, keep up the good work. Enjoy life post recovery. And thank you for taking the time for being with us on the channel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sean. And you know, next time you're up at the Buren, let me know. I'd love to have a drink with you.
Beautiful. Deal. And next time you're in Ireland, give me a shout and we'll do the same, okay?
It'd be a first time. Yeah, I'd love to go.
Oh, nice one. Well, deal. It's got to happen.
Love it. I appreciate it.
Okay. Take care, Michael. Great to chat with you. Bye bye.
Thank you. You too.